And with that, our tale turns to yet another shore, and yet another people. Of Enteleus I wish to tell you, greatest hero of his age. Legend was his name, even during these days, as were those of his band of fellows that fought with him where he went. They had ventured eastward as mercenaries for the people of Marathine, greatest Same colony to have survived the great downfall, to recover the Pelaisi of the Samese and Bashrise from the madness of the Sharesal. And indeed, they had managed the impossible and claimed a dozen of these treasures, returning to their heirs the wisdom and strength of the Old East. Over and above, Enteleus had found the spear Torasha, a legendary weapon wielded by the last Bashri king. The spearhead had been forged from the fragment of a Pelai by the Achamidase with skills now forgotten. It was common in the old cults of Mentrine to embed the Pelaisian ritual artifacts and carry them as godly witnesses, so it is said that the Ithilise took their Pelaisi with them on voyage as godly protection, but never before and never again was a weapon made from a Pelai. Many say that Torasha was a gift of the gods themselves, not meant for humans to carry, and great doom followed where it went, as it feasted on the last moments of the slain for centuries, until it found rich prey during the frenzied days of the Sharesal. But Enteleus' adventures east are a tale for another day. By the time of this story, he and his fellows had made it back to the lands of Ithyline, where their tale had been written down by the Samese to be presented in the palace of Marathine, and the king of Sinime had made them Upanesi in honor of their deeds. Several years had passed since Enteleus had sailed into war against the Jovise for the rescue of Amechele, and he sensed that his time had come to rest in his house in Sinime. The impressions of wars and of different lands and times weighed upon him, and while he dared not say it, the war between Imeri and Bachai had almost come as a relief. He felt less of a stranger, now that chaos reigned at the old home. So he went about a quieter life, until one day he was summoned by Epasheias, the king. When he followed his call, he met an old friend, aged, but with unquestionable dignity. Epheras, king of Atea, had come to see him, and he greeted him dearly, and when the kind words had been spoken, he turned to serious matters. The king trusts your judgment, Enteleus, and he is right to do so. I have come to ask you too, to do what is right and join us in war. And to Enteleus and the king he said that, to secure peace in the lands of the Bachaise, he sought to rally the men and ships of the Ithilise and sail for Valparine, to end the Imeri threat once and for all. And after contemplating, Enteleus answered, You have my respect and friendship, great king. There are none I know of who would not praise your virtue and greatness. But my days of bloodshed have passed, and I hold no grudge against the Imeri, for they have done nothing to offend me. Once have I followed your call, and nothing I will ask in return, other than that you will honor my peace now. And long Epheras tried to sway his mind and that of the others present, until Epasheias sought to appease their minds. To him and the Ithilise the call of the Bachaise came with great trouble, for they were bound to the Imerise in friendship and trade, as they were to the last Same cities with whom they were tied in a delicate balance that neither side sought to disturb. And not forgotten were the harsh words of Terethelis, for, as the Imerise, the Ithilise had turned to many customs of the Old East, and they seemed to find little wisdom in the dooming prophecies of the day. Be my guests, then, and stay with me, for tonight there will be a feast for the honor of a delegation from Marathine. In good memory I take it you have them, Enteleus, and be assured, Epheras, that they will you no harm. Epheras agreed, as he had no strife with the people of Marathine, and so they convened at night when the delegation made their entrance. There was, chiefly among them, a woman dressed as a Bethanea, but with an abishum of old Same fashion. Meleshem had come. And though they had never met, Epheras knew it was her, and she knew him. I see your great city, and I see the old home of my people. Much you have learned from us, and we stand in your debt, she greeted. But Epheras rose his voice in anger. What treachery is this, inviting the enemy into your house? And his fellows drew their weapons. There, Epasheias, Enteleus shielding his side, cast his cup onto the ground that it shattered, and he replied, I knew not that she would come, and I first meet her now. And commanding respect, he shouted, I will not have my halls turned into a field of battle. You both have come to lead my people into your war. Long have we tried to stay free from your quarrels, for our world has been war since we first came here, and we are weary of it. But if it must be, make your appeal, and we shall answer." Thus followed the decisive moments of the war, and fittingly they saw no bloodshed but a duel of words, when first Ephirras spoke. "What words do you require? Do you not see the world in decay? I lived my life listening to the tales of the Pertinaci, thinking that the doom they speak of were to come in times when the warnings would be forgotten, when blindly we would tumble. But that we fall victim to our weakness so knowingly is madness. Not ever can the children of the Antaisei be watchful, and one day they shall suffer downfall, but must we be the ones to preside over it? Do not forsake this union we were born in, I tell you, for there will not be another of its kind. You ask for words of power, but there is no command if you do not perceive its call before I speak it. To live the life as worthy heirs is the simple courage to not deny one's nature. Are we not friends, bound to live this life? If such promise fails, what is the worth of any word? You want my appeal? Side not with the fraudulent ways of the Imeri, for it will deface all bonds, and all things you trust in will be powerless." The old king's words were still echoing through the halls of the gathered Ithilisi and Samaisi, a forceful display of the pride and will of the Bachaisei, when Meleshem stepped forward. As ever, she spoke softly, but with piercing composure. "Your virtue is praised in all lands, King of Atea, but you are blind to the vices, though you are quick to ascribe them to us. What are the vices other than the lingering impress of godly wrath? And is to err not the greatest vice of all? And you, King of Atea, are mistaken, for you have surrendered to the decay that is part of every heritage. We may be caught in the ties spun ere the gods retreat, for their impress gives life and power to our bonds. But must we share in their weakness? Have they not lost these lands? If we own the fate they laid upon us, does this forbid us to shape it? Is our life the walls we build, the works we leave behind, not an unceasing renewal of an eternal bond? And is a bond not forged by the wills of two parties? But I find no two wills in your words, just the surrender of a man to myth." And to the gathered she spoke, "Ephirras asks you to surrender with him to a life foretold, but it is a life long lifeless. I ask you, walk with us, and let us follow the gods' impress where it leads to excellence, but renounce it where it leads to downfall." Long waited Epasheias, turned inward, silent. Then he spoke, "I hear your words, and they are powerful. There is a fork in our fate's path, it seems to me, and no guide. What is your counsel, Antileus?" The Upaneo stood hunched, as if ringing with invisible foes. Then he rose and spoke, "On my travels east, I saw people treat their gods like children, boiling them with favors or rebuking them when things went wrong. Perhaps there is wisdom in that, for we all are children of something, even the gods. And perhaps they are the ones deserving our pity, silent spectators banned from the taste of things but still hungry. Is this not irony, the most tragic fate of all? To witness the passing of what is yours, of what you could have made your own. Your words, Ephirras, I have heard well, for they were my home until I set out and saw the lands where the gods once dwelled, and yes, they dwelled there too. And it pains me, never would I have wanted for this fate to come. But then it seems that you have chosen tragedy long before this day, and perhaps this brings you closer to the gods than I will ever be. But I cannot choose your way, for it would make me a slave to shackles of my own making. And if I must live and die in chains, at least let them be forged by someone else." And to Meleshem he spoke, "I shall wield my spear once more for you. Whether your words are wise or foolish I cannot say, but you will lead these people into a different future, one where there is room for chance." And so a people's fate was decided. The call of Antileus did not fail its effect. The Bachai and Samei of Ithilene convened, and now pressed for a choice they followed suit and joined the Imeri alliance. The Imeri knew to seize the opportunity, and in secrecy they went to sway the minds of the Chamiai and the Eulidinae, who stood close to them but had not dared to take up arms against the Bachaisei. They agreed to open their harbors for a great force to be sent from both seas. Only the Ovisei had taken hold of the lands up north, and they would pose a great threat to the invaders. And so a pact with them was made, and I wish I could tell the tale of this miraculous event, but it has been lost if it was ever written down, as little is known of them in all regards. They are barely mentioned in Melishem's epic, and my only guess is that she was careful not to emphasize the importance of this pact, to not threaten the fragile allegiance with the Bajai. What tale I do know to tell in greater detail is that of the final war on Bajai, for it is without doubt the most powerful memory of our people, second only to the Great March East. Having rallied all their forces, the fleets of Imeri and Ithili set out, and men were carried to the shores of Uludine by the thousands. Then they marched west, and they were met by the forces of the Bajai where they went. The lands and seas were shaken by thunderous assault, by a war to end an era, a final chapter in the tale of many heroes. As chance willed it, the calamity found its peak where it had begun, at the foot of Ephera's halls, when the Imeri alliance reached the walls of Atea. And for a final time, Epheras rallied his friends and donned his armor, to ride out and meet the foes in open fields, the last voyage of a great king of old, a final search to cut the adamant strings of fate. And he raged, frightening and terrible, and Ephetheo fell by his hands, overcome by the king's wrath. To the Imeri he appeared as an icon of the wrathful gods, and they were struck by fear until none would dare to cross his path. Then he was met by Enteleus, champion unbeaten, in his spear the madness of downfall. Epheras halted, and he dropped his helmet to speak. So I thought foolishly to prove greater than the verdict of fate, but to think that you, greatest of our age, would be the bringer of our doom? What mockery indeed is this time where right is wrong, and wrong is right. A fool I have been, not to see that lesser men were long among us ere we would be cast from these lands. And Enteleus walked towards him. You have not seen the madness in the east, Epheras? Many places have I seen beyond the reaches of your dream, old king. And all their people died with pompous tales on their lips, gods and great doom foretold. Countless tales of worlds created and destroyed have I heard, but none will outlast the corpses of their tellers. What makes you think yours so special? Are the gods not tricksters, fluent in many tongues? To think they would reveal their thoughts to you? I have heard enough, interrupted him Epheras. There is no conversing with the mad. Enteleus spoke no more, but he did what he did best, and readied his spear and raced towards Epheras, and the spear struck the old king, and he became one with the torments of an aching world. So he went, the spear Torasha in his chest, the truest witness to his dying sorrow. And his sorrow and pain were met by those of hundreds before him, of ignited wills raging against the inevitable, and he found himself in them. At last, he smiled, in face of greatest agony, and with force he took the spear, and placed it gently back in Enteleus' hands. His own he rested on them, and their both flaming spirits were intertwined. Once more, Epheras spoke. I may have lived the life of a fool, but you are much like the gods indeed, ever a spectator. There's nothing you have lived for. No, answered Enteleus, grim and tired. I have seen many lives go by, but never chosen one. There was, at last, an understanding between them. So fell Epheras, last great king of old, and with him died a shared dream of the Bajai. A father to his people he seemed to Enteleus in these last moments, and grave sorrow came over him. He would not return from the war, and he was laid to rest with Epheras and Torasha by his fellows, and they would not say where. Sometimes the past is meant to be the past, I suppose. Epheras' rising did little to prevent the downfall of the Bajai, but it did save his home from destruction, and Atea was spared. The final battle happened up north, when Teretheles and his friends made their last stands, and the fight consumed the great city of Minua. It would never again rise from the ashes in its former glory, sharing the fate of so many things of the old days. And yet, they were also the days to see the birth of so many things that continue to shape the fate of this world to this day. They saw the birth of the Imeri, and in her last and perhaps greatest feat, Melishem ensured that the beaten found their way back into the circles of their former friends, for she went to see the oracle of Amechele. It is not known what the two conversed. Some say the oracle broke her silence to speak to the Patheneia, but we do not know with certainty. What matters is the symbolic power of this visit. The triumphant went to embrace the last remaining icon of the old traditions, showing both victorious and defeated that there was a shared path into a common future. And so if we can trust the accounts, the vision of Melisham can hardly be understated, even if, sadly, she did not live to see the fruits of her efforts. For not long after the end of the war she fell victim to treachery, perhaps by Caletho, perhaps by others who held a grudge against the Pethenea, and there were not few of them. Some say even that her death was part of the bargain she struck with those who feast at night, a sacrifice to ensure that the old cults would not be pushed aside. This seems implausible to me. What we do know is that the war ended in a fragile but surprisingly stable peace that united what remained from the old city-states of the Bachai and Samay to a loose realm held together by the will to sustain the friendships from an age past, be it because this was the only way to endure in the new era to come, or be it for nostalgic remembrance of the great tales of old. Tales of struggles, but tales of awakening.